mynews.studio.
Under the winter sky of December 2025, electric cars quietly outsold petrol vehicles in Europe. What does this really mean for the way we'll be getting around in the future?
Today's date is 2026-02-05. Let's get right into it. For the first time, battery electric vehicles, EVs, sold more than petrol cars in a single month across the EU. The numbers were close, just under 218,000 electric cars registered, compared to a little over 216,000 petrol cars. It's not a huge difference, but symbolically, it's a major moment.
Exactly. And if we zoom out to the entire year in 2025, EVs made up 17.4% of new car sales in the EU. That's up from 13.6% the year before. Meanwhile, petrol car sales dropped by nearly 19%. That's quite a shift. But was this mainly because EV prices went down, or did policy drive most of the change?
Policy played a huge role. For example, Italy offered up to €11,000 per buyer, covering about 30% of the price for some EVs. That led to a 51% jump in Italian EV registrations. Greece and Poland had their own incentives, about €9,000 plus scrappage bonuses if you turned in an old car.
And these incentives weren't just blanket offers. They were designed to reach low and middle-income buyers, not just people buying their second or third car. Plus, car makers stepped up. Volkswagen and BMW, for example, launched more affordable options, which really brought in new customers. So the shift wasn't only about government support, right?
Right, exactly. There's also a bigger picture here. In 2025, Europe's EV sales grew by 33%. Globally, the growth was only 20%. China still sells the most EVs overall, almost 13 million last year. But Europe's growth rate was faster. Germany's market grew nearly 50%. The UK was up by 27%. And France, the Netherlands, and Belgium together made up over 60% of EU EV registrations.
And you can't ignore the influence of Chinese manufacturers. BYD, for example, tripled its EU market share to 1.9%. They exported more than 1 million vehicles into Europe. On the other hand, Tesla's sales in the region dropped by nearly 38% during the year. In December, Volkswagen led with more than a quarter of the market.
But there's more than just sales figures here. The EU auto sector employs about 13.6 million people, which is 8% of all manufacturing jobs. The move to EVs means companies like Volkswagen and Stellantis have to invest a lot, not just in new car models, but also in retraining workers for battery production or software. Do you think this shift is more of a risk for jobs, or does it open up new opportunities?
It's really both, and that's the core challenge. Even with 10.8 million cars sold in the EU last year, the highest in 5 years, profit margins are getting squeezed. Chinese brands are bringing in lower-cost EVs. Tariffs from the US are raising prices, and automakers have to pay more to meet new emission standards. It puts pressure on the whole industry to keep up.
And policy is evolving too. In December, the EU adjusted its original plan for 2035. Instead of a total ban on combustion engines, the target is now a 90% reduction in CO2, with exceptions for cars using e-fuels or low-carbon steel. In other words, hybrids and some new tech have more time now.
That's an important point. In December, electrified vehicles, including hybrids and plug-in hybrids, made up 67% of sales, up from less than 58% the year before. Hybrids alone took 34.5% of the full-year market. The policy change gives them more room to grow, but with incentives and new models, the EV momentum looks strong.
Most analysts think pure EVs will take another 5 years before they really dominate. But with Southeast Asia doubling EV sales and countries copying the EU's approach, like Italy's €11,000 grants or Greece's €9,000 plus scrappage, it shows that big decarbonization efforts are possible. The question is, can other regions match this mix of policy, industry change, and consumer interest?
And can the EU keep up momentum if Chinese brands keep gaining ground, or if job skills have to shift from traditional manufacturing to batteries and software? These are still open questions. But that December milestone does set out a kind of blueprint for other regions that want to cut transport emissions.
What comes next? Will this flexible approach, like the EU's new stance on hybrids and e-fuels, become the norm elsewhere? Or does the real progress depend on how quickly things like charging networks and worker retraining can keep up?
That's what we'll be tracking. The EU's electric car surge isn't just a European story. It's a signal for global discussions about transport, energy, and climate.
Thanks for joining us. Electric cars outsold petrol cars in the EU for the first time, thanks to targeted policy, affordable models, and a changing industry. But there are still challenges with jobs, competition, and infrastructure. Where Europe leads, others are watching closely.
Thanks for listening. Today's episode was brought to you by mynews.studio. You can try it now for free.